I lived alone in a small, older house. It had a certain charm, but it also had its quirks. The floorboards creaked, the windows rattled in the wind, and sometimes, I could swear, I heard the pipes making noises even when no water was running. I'd gotten used to most of it. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen making lunch. I had a small shelf above the counter where I kept a few mugs and some spice jars. As I was reaching for the salt, I noticed something odd. One of the mugs, a bright blue one that I always kept towards the back, was now sitting right at the edge of the shelf, like it was about to fall off. I frowned. I was usually pretty careful about where I put things. I could have sworn I had placed it further back. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I'd just been preoccupied when putting it away. I pushed the mug back into its usual spot and went back to cooking. A few hours later, I was in the living room reading a book. I had a small decorative bowl on the coffee table, filled with unique-looking stones I'd collected on some hikes a while back. I glanced down at the table and noticed that one of the stones, a large white one that had been in the middle of the bowl, was now sitting on the floor next to the table. I stared at it, confused. I definitely hadn't knocked it off. I hadn't even been close to the table. Maybe the cat had somehow managed to knock it out of the bowl. But my cat, Leo, was asleep on the armchair across the room, completely oblivious. I picked up the stone and put it back in the bowl, a little seed of unease starting to sprout in my mind. This was getting weird. Over the next few days, more little things started happening. My Kindle that I'd left on my bedside table would be on the floor in the morning. A pen that I'd placed on the kitchen counter would end up rolling into the sink. A small picture frame on my desk would be slightly askew. At first, I tried to find logical explanations for everything. Maybe the house settled a bit and the floor was more uneven than before, causing things to roll. Maybe the cat was more active at night than I realized. Maybe I was just forgetful and wasn't remembering where I'd put things. But then, things started to escalate. One evening, I was watching TV in the living room. I had a blanket neatly folded on the arm of the couch. I got up to go to the kitchen to get a drink, and when I came back, the blanket was unfolded and lying in a heap on the floor. Leo was still asleep in the armchair. There was no draft. A few days later, I was in the shower. I had placed my shampoo bottle on a small ledge in the corner of the shower. As I was rinsing my hair, I heard a distinct thump. I opened my eyes, and the shampoo bottle was lying on the bathroom floor, the cap off, and shampoo splattered on the floor. That was it. I couldn't explain that away. There was no way that a nearly full bottle could have fallen on its own, and I know I didn't bump it. My heart started to race. I felt a cold dread creeping into my chest. Was someone else in the house? I quickly finished my shower, grabbed a towel, and cautiously walked through the silent house, checking every room. Everything seemed normal. The doors were locked, the windows were closed. There was no sign of anyone else. But the feeling of being watched, of something not being right, was overwhelming. I started to feel genuinely scared in my own home. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. I had placed my phone on the nightstand next to me. I was just drifting off when I heard a soft clink. I opened my eyes and saw my phone slowly sliding off the nightstand and onto the floor. I sat bolt upright in bed, my eyes wide with terror. There was no way that could have happened on its own. The nightstand was perfectly level. I hadn't touched it. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay in bed listening to every creak and groan of the house, convinced that something unseen was moving around me. The next day, I started looking for answers. I talked to friends. I searched online. Some people suggested it could be a draft. Others jokingly said I had a ghost. I tried to remain skeptical, to find a rational explanation. The more things happened, the harder it became. One afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table, working on my laptop. I had a ceramic mug filled with pens sitting next to me. I looked down for a second, and when I looked back up, the mug had shifted about 6 inches to the left, leaving a faint scratch mark on the wooden surface. That was the moment I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening in my house, something I couldn't explain, and whatever it was making me feel increasingly uneasy and afraid in the place where I should have felt the safest. I still live in that house, and things still happen occasionally. A door will creak open on its own. A picture will fall off the wall for no reason. I try to tell myself it's just the old house settling. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that there's something else going on, something unseen that shares my home.
My parents had gone out to a movie, leaving me at home alone. I had to be around 14 at the time. I was pretty excited. I had the whole house to myself for a few hours. I made myself a big bowl of popcorn, settled into the living room with my headphones on, ready to game. It was probably around 10 p.m. I was deep into a particularly intense online match when I started to feel weird. Like the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped. I took off my headphones for a second, and yeah, it felt colder than it should. I shrugged it off, figuring maybe the AC had kicked on. I put my headphones back on and readied up for another match. But then, I started getting this feeling like someone was watching me. I kept glancing around the living room, but there was nothing there. Just the usual furniture, the flickering light from the TV screen. Then I heard it. A faint whisper. I ripped off my headphones, my heart pounding. Silence. I strained my ears, listening for any sound. Nothing. I told myself it was just my imagination, the sound of the game still echoing in my ears. I put my headphones back on, but I couldn't concentrate on the game anymore. That whisper had really freaked me out. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling increasingly uneasy. A few minutes later, it happened again. A whisper, closer this time, and I could almost make out a word. It sounded like, "Alex." My blood ran cold. There was no one else in the house. My parents wouldn't be back for at least another hour. This wasn't my imagination. I stood up quickly, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. The hair on my arms stood on end. I felt a wave of goosebumps wash over me. The air in the room felt heavy, like something was pressing down on me. I decided to check the rest of the house. Maybe a window was open somewhere, and it was just the wind making weird noises. I walked through the silent rooms, turning on lights as I went. Everything seemed normal. The windows were all closed and locked. I went back to the living room, trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. Maybe I'd watched too many scary movies lately. I sat back down on the couch, but I couldn't relax. I kept looking around, feeling like eyes were on me. Then I saw a shadow. It flickered in the hallway, just for a split second. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. There was definitely something there. I grabbed the remote control, my hand shaking, ready to use it as a weapon if I had to. I stood up slowly, my eyes fixed on the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. Silence. I took a tentative step towards the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the doorway, I saw it. The old wooden rocking horse that my grandma had given me years ago, the one that usually sat still in the corner of the hallway, was rocking gently back and forth. There was no breeze. No one was near it. It was just rocking, slowly and deliberately, in the silence of the empty house. I backed away slowly, a feeling of pure terror washing over me. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew I didn't want to be there. I grabbed my phone and practically threw myself onto the couch, dialing my mom's number. She answered on the second ring. "Mom, you need to come home. There's something weird happening here," I blurted out, my voice cracking with fear. I tried to explain what I'd heard and seen, my words tumbling out in a rush. My mom tried to calm me down, saying it was probably just my imagination, but I could tell she was a little worried. She said they'd leave the movie early and be home as soon as they could. I stayed huddled on the couch, all the lights in the house blazing, until I heard their car pull into the driveway. I practically threw the door open when they came in, relief flooding through me. Even though they didn't see or hear anything, I knew what I experienced was real. That rocking horse, the whispers in the dark. It wasn't my imagination, and even now, years later, whenever I see that old rocking horse, a shiver still runs down my spine. I never liked being home alone in that house after that.
The house felt different tonight. It was the night after Sarah, Luke, and I had decided to be, well, stupid. Sarah had brought over this old Ouija board she'd found at a flea market, and we'd set it up in my basement, giggling nervously and asking the usual dumb questions. We hadn't really gotten anything concrete, just the planchette moving randomly, probably one of us pushing it. Still, there was a weird energy down there, a cold spot that wouldn't go away, even with the small space heater running. Now, the next night, I was home alone. Sarah and Luke had gone back to their own places, and my parents were out of town for the weekend. I was trying to relax on the couch, watching some mindless movie, but I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched, a prickle on the back of my neck that kept making me turn around, even though there was nothing there. It started subtly. The lights in the living room flickered once, a quick, almost imperceptible dip in brightness. I frowned, thinking it was just an electrical thing. This old house had its quirks, but then it happened again, a little more pronounced this time, the lights dimming noticeably before returning to normal. I got up and checked the breaker box in the basement, the same basement where we'd played with the Ouija board. The air down there felt heavy and still, even colder than I remembered. The breakers all looked fine. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, fueled by last night's silly game. Back upstairs, I tried to settle back into my movie, but the flickering started again, more frequently now. It wasn't a consistent rhythm, it was erratic, almost playful, like someone was flicking a light switch on and off really fast. It was starting to make me feel genuinely uneasy. Then things took a stranger turn. I had a small lamp on the end table next to the couch. It wasn't flickering with the main lights, it was on its own program. It started to blink, a slow, deliberate pulse, like a heartbeat. I stared at it, my blood running cold. That lamp had a regular on-off switch. It wasn't one of those fancy dimming ones. I reached over and turned it off completely. For a moment, there was just the light from the TV screen. Then, the lamp flicked back on by itself, still pulsing rhythmically. I scrambled back on the couch, my eyes wide with disbelief and a growing sense of fear. Okay, this was beyond a simple electrical problem. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking. I wanted to call Sarah or Luke, but what would I even say? Hey, remember that stupid Ouija board? Well, now my lights are acting possessed. They'd probably think I was losing it. I decided to try and ignore it, to focus on the TV. But then I heard a noise from the kitchen, a soft clink like something had been gently placed on the counter. I froze, my ears straining. The house was silent again. I slowly got up, my heart pounding in my chest. I crept towards the kitchen, peering around the corner. Everything looked normal. The dishes were stacked in the drying rack, the counters were clear. But as I turned to go back to the living room, I saw something that caused me to pause. One of the kitchen chairs that were always tucked neatly under the table was now slightly pulled out, as if someone had just gotten up from it. I hadn't been in the kitchen since making a cup of tea hours ago. My breath hitched. This was really happening. Something was in my house with me. The flickering in the living room intensified, the main lights blinking rapidly, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The lamp on the end table was still pulsing its eerie rhythm. I felt a wave of pure terror wash over me. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting around the room, searching for... I didn't even know. But I felt a presence, a cold, unseen force that was making its presence known. Then I heard it again, the soft clink from the kitchen, followed by a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. This time, it was closer, clearer. I didn't wait to see what it was. I grabbed my keys and my jacket and bolted out the front door, not even bothering to lock it behind me. I ran across the lawn and didn't stop until I reached my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson's porch, banging on her door until she groggily opened it. I poured out everything that had happened, my words tumbling out in a panicked rush. Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. She let me stay with her for the rest of the night. The next morning, when I finally went back to my house with my parents, who had thankfully cut their trip short, everything seemed normal again. The lights weren't flickering, the lamp was off, the chair was back under the kitchen table. But the air still felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something we had invited in with that stupid Ouija board. I never touched one again, and even now, years later, I still get a shiver whenever a light bulb flickers unexpectedly.